very different player.
Hello, welcome to today's episode of Juicing the Numbers, your statistics and sports podcast. I am among your hosts, Joshua Tracy.
And I'm the rest of your hosts, Corwin Heller.
And these parts make one, or I guess two complete hosts. Anyway, welcome to the show this week. It's been a busy time in the world of NFL football, a quieter but, relatively heating up time in the world of baseball. We'll get into each, as well as a brief recap of the NFL playoff games from last week, and I look forward to the championship games coming up next week. Jesus Christ, can I think of the words?
You're on this podcast, so no.
Oh, God, no. And it gets worse every week, and we've only been doing this longer and longer. Corwin, are you ready to get started?
Yes.
All right, then let's try to knock these out a little bit more quickly. I know I forgot to say that we should do this. Well, we were chit-chatting before the show, but let's just do it now. Let's do a recap of the divisional round that we just went through in the NFL. Take a peek at the championship round and make some predictions. Sound good to you?
Sure.
All right. Yeah. Again, sorry, I totally forgot we had to do this. Anyway.
Totally forgot to.
Yep. Oh, we didn't prepare very well.
What else is new?
All right, let's start on Saturday, January 16th. In the early game, we had the Los Angeles Rams heading over to the Green Bay Packers. If I recall our conversation from last week correctly, I said this would be a non-competitive game. You thought this would be a little bit closer than I made it out to be, but I think in the end, we both picked the Packers. Corwin, what was your impression of this game?
Man, Aaron Rodgers, give him the MVP. He deserves it. You know, it wasn't the prettiest game, but at the same time, you know, Green Bay's looking like the favorite in the NFC, like they have been this whole time, and they're seriously looking like, you know, especially with the certain injuries to certain players at certain other games this weekend. No spoilers. I honestly think they're the all-around favorite.
Yeah, I mean, they looked unfucking beatable. I mean, it was a great game by the Packers all the way around. Aaron Rodgers himself, the man, went 23 for 36, 296 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, no sacks, a quarterback rating of 108.1. Jared Goff did have a much better outing than I was expecting. He went 21 for 27, 174 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, but he got sacked 4 times. However, he still managed to turn that around into a 105.9 passer rating. I'd also like to point out that Aaron Rodgers had 4 rushing attempts for -3 yards and a touchdown. And that is a delightful stat line.
Yes. I will say, you know, Jared Goff definitely looked better, or at least he looked efficient. You know, he was making smart throws, but my goodness, it was not close to a dominant quarterback performance. It just felt like everything was kind of just dumped down low, and that was that. At the same time, that's been effective for them for a while, so I can't really nitpick too much. It's just also happening to watch Aaron Rodgers, who a couple more deep balls throughout that game, a little bit better efficiency.
Yeah,
Well, Aaron Rodgers, it's just hard to compare him to a guy like Jared Goff and not just swoon.
I know. Yeah, the Jared Goff performance very much so feels like a style of game we would have gotten out of, pardon the comparison, Drew Brees for the last 2 or 3 years. There was a lot of shorter passes where you kind of bank on the yards after completion and kind of game manage it up front and just make sure that you have a good high completion percent. However, because if you look at the intended air yards for Aaron Rodgers, 9.2 intended air yards per pass attempt, Jared Goff 5.3. So in theory, I would imagine anyway, part of the game plan would be to bank on the yards after completion to kind of carry what you're not getting on the air yards. However, that didn't really bank out since Green Bay's defense did a pretty nice job containing all things considered, allowing only 2.5 yards after completion per completion, for a total of 52 yards were for after the catch. That's it. 52
Wow.
yards after the catch. For comparison, Green Bay 149 yards after the catch.
Mhm.
Like fucking triple. Because if you look at Jared Goff's, quote unquote advanced stats, 0 bad throws. He only suffered 2 drops. He did so on 25% pressure. That's not great. But regardless, he got 6 yards per scramble. This isn't the worst performance from him personally, but this also was not the performance that was going to turn the tide in this game.
Right.
So
And, it's unfortunate for the Rams because they played, a great game, but, hey, Green Bay's better, they moved on. Devontae Adams had his due. Allen Lazard stepped up. It was a good game all around, Packers offense. Packers defense did pretty good, but, you know,
they did what they
offensively
needed to
story.
do.
Yep.
Quiet game from Aaron Donald, who finished the game with 1 combined tackle and 1 assist tackle, and that's it.
Tough, but, Green Bay has one hell of an offensive line.
That and very likely playing hurt. So,
Yeah.
is what it is. All right, let's turn our attention over to the afternoon game or night game on Saturday. Buffalo against Baltimore. This was a weird game. Very much so a defensive slugfest combined with a missed field goal bonanza as the Bills won 17-3 on the back of a game I don't know if I enjoyed watching or not.
I didn't I did because of the outcome, but as far as actual football, no.
Yeah, it was entertaining to see both teams kind of duke it out a bit, but I maintain that while defensive slugfests can be fun, it's never as fun as seeing points on the board, and going into the half tied 3-3 really sucks.
Yeah.
It's just not fun. Um,
Mhm.
and as much as I'm going to attribute a lot of this to good defensive play, as I think a lot of it gets due credit for that, especially Buffalo's defensive performance here. There was some bad QB play here as well. Lamar Jackson ended up going 14 for 24, 162 yards, no passing touchdowns, 1 interception, got sacked 3 times. Good for a quarterback rating of 61.5. Tyler Huntley, 6 for 13, 60 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 1 sack, a quarterback rating of 59.8. And on the other side, Josh Allen, 23 for 37, only 206 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 sacks, a quarterback rating of 86.1. So really no dominant performances when it comes to the passing game. The rushing game doesn't really look much different. The lead rusher in the entire game was a tie between J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards with 42 yards. Great game for Stephon Diggs, who was the only receiver to finish over 100 yards receiving, but that's it.
This was a defensive game, I will pat myself in the back for calling that out last week when we talked about this. Um, I mean, this game came down to one singular play, you know? Ravens are driving the ball at the end zone, throws a 101-yard interception return for a touchdown. It's just that singular play changed the outcome of the game, and it just what else can you say on top of that?
Man.
It's a shame because, like, you hate seeing games just come down to one singular event. That's the whole reason you play for 60 minutes. It's, the sample size argument we have with baseball all the time, but you can definitively say in this case, it was a singular play that decided this game. I'm sure there were plenty other opportunities, plenty other mistakes that added up to a fair chunk of it, but you change one singular play that didn't happen to be, a score to win, essentially, and the whole game is different.
Yeah. Yeah, I really think that's it. Um, there's other stats I think paint a good picture of why this game was so quiet overall. Obviously, the ultimate outcome is what Corwin just said. If Lamar Jackson doesn't throw that red zone interception, which I think Corwin, you said was his first red zone interception ever.
He was 45-0 coming into this game in the red zone. 45 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
Fucking nuts. Um,
Mhm.
so if you take that, because literally if you just trade those points over, which I know you can't do, blah 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 blah. You throw those 7 points from Buffalo's column, getting them on the pick six into the Ravens column. This game's still tied. Maybe we're still playing it today. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you take away 7 points there, give the Ravens a
Stop the
field
count.
goal, and that's still, a one-score game with the momentum change not nearly affecting this as much as it did.
The Ravens just need to find 8 points, which is one more than they have. Um,
Well, at that
any
point, they would only need to find 4
doesn't matter. Yeah. Um,
bitches.
this is wild though. I do want to just share it because again, if I recall correctly from our conversation on the looking forward to this game last week, I think we both picked Buffalo, and I think we both said it would probably be largely on the back of a Josh Allen performance. Josh Allen not having a great game, um, which is super wild. So he intended 10.1 intended air yards per pass attempt. He completed 4.7, less than half.
That math doesn't work out too great.
No,
Throwing that
sorry,
out there.
that's completed air yards per completion. His completed air yards per pass attempt was 2.9, but that number is obviously going to be lower because larger
Right.
sample size. And granted, he definitely got picked up a lot more for the yards after completion than the Ravens did. He also had a higher drop pass percent than Lamar Jackson. He had the highest bad throw percent in the game at 22.9.
That's a very high number.
Yeah.
That is
Actually,
a
all three
scary high.
quarterbacks finished. Sorry, he had the second highest. Technically, Tyler Huntley, 23.1, just edges him out.
Not a
And
real
he had the
person.
lowest yards from per scramble in the game with 4 yards per. Oh, he only scrambled one time. Doesn't matter then. But this is like he intended 372 yards, which is more than double what Lamar Jackson intended, and more than triple what Tyler Huntley intended, and only came away with 3 more yards than Lamar Jackson did at the end of the day. That's in the air, I should say. In the air.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's just how the game works out, man. The Bills shut them down deep. The Ravens shut them down deep. Both teams have excellent cornerbacks. Again, that's, what we talked about last week, and it happened probably for the first time where our prediction, or at least what we talked about, came true. And it's weird. It's a weird feeling being able to say you know a thing or two about football. It's a new saying for me.
It's a new feeling. I do want to move on from this, but I also want to share you this one other statistical anomaly that I'm enjoying, which is that
Sure.
Lamar Jackson had 6.7 intended air yards per pass attempt and
Mhm.
had 7.5 completed air yards per completion.
Okay.
So he completed 0.8 more yards in the air than he intended. Granted, again,
I
completions is a smaller sample size than attempts, but I still think that's the first time I've actually seen that since we've been looking at the advanced passing stats, where where any of the numbers following intended is larger than the intended. That's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, I just, I don't have the brain function right now to really s comprehend and wrap my head around that, so I'm just gonna choose not to.
Yeah, we don't need to. Let's move on to a game I think we both enjoyed a lot more. Kansas City, Cleveland,
Oh.
in which those Kansas City Chiefs stomped on Cleveland's balls, 22-17. I mean that metaphorically, in that the Browns fans I think had a lot of hope and The Factory of Sadness once again re-earns its name. Um, uh, this game was a lot lower scoring than I think either one of us would have said it would have been. Um,
Well,
tell me your takeaway.
there were some events that took place over the course of this game that caused the score to drop down a bit. Um, Obviously, the big storyline here is Patrick Mahomes, his concussion and really getting shaken up to the point where it really, I don't want to say sparked because I don't think it's the right word, but allowed for Cleveland Browns comeback and kind of gave them, that motivation to say, hey, we have a window here. We can fight back, and fell short. Baker Mayfield was Baker Mayfield. That's kind of how it happens sometimes. But at the end of the day, it's a shame that we didn't get to see the full Kansas City team close out this game. It's even scarier thinking we might not see Patrick Mahomes the rest of the season. Obviously, all of our thoughts are with him and his health. Um, but I'm surprised, Cleveland was able to stick with it as well as they did, especially late game. But yeah, otherwise it was a very enjoyable game at the very least. Chad Henne, you're a psychopath and I love it.
Yeah, that headfirst diving run was the act of a sheer madman, and I loved it.
The fucking gunslinger throws, just insane.
Yeah, this was a wild game. So Baker Mayfield, 23 for 37, 204 yards, one touchdown, one interception, one sack. Good for a quarterback rating of 74.6. Patrick Mahomes, 21 for 30, 255 yards, one touchdown, no interceptions, no sacks, a quarterback rating of 106.9. And Chad Henne, 6 for 8, 66 yards, zero touchdowns, one interception. That was a fucking heartbreaker.
I'm
And
looking at his passing chart right now, which shows, from 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage to 50 yards down the field. And that interception almost doesn't come up. It's
wow.
just like a little red dot just before the top of the chart. And holy shit, it was magnificent. Oof.
Yeah. Sorry, just to cap it out, quarterback rating of 59.4. Yeah. One other fun fact. Cleveland returned 2 kicks and no punts, and Kansas City returned no kicks and 1 punt. So there you go. Hey, look at that. Yeah, I mean, if you're a Cleveland fan, I think obviously it hurts to have the loss, but I don't think you're that beat up about it. Because your team played well. Obviously, you wanted probably more out of Baker, and you got fucked on that helmet to helmet non-call. But by and large, I'd say that your team did well. Nick Chubb was a little bit slow starting there. But I think you got a lot to be happy about. Kansas City, obviously, you hope Mahomes comes back, but otherwise, you had a over 100-yard performance from Tyreek Hill and over 100-yard performance from Travis Kelce. You had a very near 100-yard performance from Darrell Williams. Like, there's a lot to be happy about if you're a Kansas City fan. But if I'm a Browns fan, I'm feeling good about my ability to be back here next year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I mean, you have Pat Mahomes, so obviously you feel that every year.
No, the Browns.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that makes much more sense. Yeah, it must suck to go through this as a Browns fan. Your first time going to the playoffs in possibly your entire life. The first time you win a playoff game, and you're really showing a chance to win against the number one team in the league, despite losing their quarterback. But that's something that just doesn't happen every day, especially not in Cleveland. And losing in the heartbreaking fashion they did, where they gave that hope and just ripped it right back. You got to have some hope for next year. Obviously, the team is, for the most part, coming back as a whole. Baker has kind of shown a little bit more of that franchise quarterback moxie that he's had as a rookie. Um, but at the same time, I feel like it probably wasn't as difficult to see because you're a Browns fan, and at the very least, you have experience dealing with these kinds of emotions.
Yeah, losing as a fan of a bad team who made it to 2 AFC championship games in back-to-back seasons, losing in the playoffs is a significantly better feeling than not making the playoffs. It is a significantly better feeling. Um,
Unless
so
it's an overtime to Tim Tebow throwing a crossing pass to Demaryius Thomas in the wild card round after
well, no,
pulling coverage.
your real problem there was losing to Tim Tebow. That's just embarrassing.
No, 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 we didn't lose to Tim Tebow, we lost to God.
Yes, I said that. You lost to Tim Tebow. Uh, anyway, um, all right. So let's take it over to the final game, the Sunday night game. Saints Buccaneers, the Old Man Bowl, the what's another the figgy pudding bowl. I don't know what old people do.
Oh, man.
Um, there Tampa Bay ended up coming out on top of New Orleans, 30-20. Tom Brady doing it all. Drew Brees not doing anything well. Brady coming out of this game 18 for 33, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 1 sack, a 92.9 quarterback rating. Drew Brees 19 for 34, 134 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, no sacks for a 38.1 quarterback rating. And the only other person to throw a pass attempt in uh, New Orleans was Jameis Winston, who threw a single 56-yard touchdown pass, good for a 158.3 quarterback rating, the max. And I say that because it is genuinely astonishing that they didn't pull Drew Brees at some point. Um, and I say this as a pretty
I
big fan of Drew
mm,
Brees because at some point you you got to realize something's got to change. At some point, you got to be like, look, man, look, Drew. This isn't about you. We're just trying to change things up and see if a change in pace of the offense can get us something more going. And if we think it's appropriate later on, we'll bring you back in. But right now, we're just trying to throw something at the wall to stay in this game. And they just didn't. And I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but it's real fucking weird in the modern NFL.
I'm torn on what I would side with just because it's Drew Brees playing in possibly the last game of his career in New Orleans, and pulling him and having him finish out his career on the bench, is depressing to me. It's a sad thought. You hate to see a guy with his talent, first ballot Hall of Famer, top 4 quarterback of all time. I just I couldn't I wouldn't wanna see that be the final picture in, like, the storybook of his career. At the same time, the way you've seen him play the past 2 years, the way he was playing Sunday night, the just mysterious effectiveness of Taysom Hill, when he had to play, I think it was week 17, it's tough to argue against pulling him. I get why you wouldn't necessarily want to trust Taysom Hill to win you a divisional playoff game against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. I get why you would think Taysom Hill might not be able to uh, be an effective quarterback against the Buccaneers in the first place. I, it's just, man, it's hard to be worse than Drew was.
I mean, yeah, the 38 quarterback rating is pretty fucking ugly. And honestly, this might be bold to say, I probably would have played Jameis. Um,
Oh, I absolutely would have too, but it's the Saints we're talking about who have a love
right.
affair with Taysom Hill.
You're right. They do. It's weird. And I will say a good chunk of what I think happened here is Drew Brees and the Saints not getting the yards after completion they're most used to. There's also the fact that Michael Thomas got absolutely shut the fuck up um, in a way that we just do not see that happen. Michael Thomas finished the day with 4 targets and 0 receptions. That's wild.
Yeah.
But anyway, Drew Brees only got 3.3 yards after the catch, and that's for based on the past several seasons of Saints football, that's kind of been their bread and butter.
Mhm.
That's where they've gotten their damage done. And because their receivers were getting contacted so quickly, they weren't able to pick up the yards after the catch. And because Drew Brees isn't a deep ball quarterback at this point in his career, they weren't able to really get the ball farther downfield, hence the 3 interceptions. It was just rock meeting hard place. I mean, Drew can't force the ball downfield. He's throwing picks. We can't do short field stuff because we're getting hit the second we make the catch, and then nothing happened. Like that's
Yeah, that's
that that's
shows
it.
what happens when you have an ineffective quarterback who can't push the ball downfield. Your team becomes very one-dimensional, As great as Alvin Kamara is, he can't do everything against such a good defensive team like New Orleans, and it's a tough way to go out, but here we are, It's something you gotta man, it's tough. It's a tough conversation because it's Drew Brees. Same thing happened to Peyton Manning. I'm hoping someday the same thing will happen to Tom Brady, but at this point, I can't I can't argue against him. Um,
He's drinking straight from the fucking tap, man. I don't even know what the fuck he's got going on. It's wild to watch.
Maybe strawberries are fucking cancerous. Who knows? It's just crazy.
I don't even have an explanation. I don't want to have an explanation. I just want it to end, but it won't. But for reference, Drew Brees, we only have the advanced passing stats going back the last 3 years on Pro Football Reference. So in 2018, 2019, and 2020, respectively, his yards after the catch per completion, 5.0, 5.3, and 5.4. His yards after the catch per completion in this game, 3.3. And that adds up. That adds up a lot.
Yeah. Do you think Drew comes back next year?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
Honestly, I don't know what it would be for. The Saints had the last 2 years, 3 years to really push for that Super Bowl win and just couldn't get to the game. And I think Drew's got to realize that while it was a worthwhile endeavor coming back these past 2 seasons, because there was definitely still that opportunity, it's not getting any better. Any better. The odds of them doing it are only going to get worse from here. And I think he's better off leaving with his career still looking really like his last season, this one that just finished up. It's still not a bad season. It's still over
No.
a 70% completion percent. The yards are relatively in line with where he usually gets. Is like all the Drew Breezy stats look Drew Breezy. I would end on that. I oh man, if I'm Drew, I don't want to come out here and throw like a 50% completion. You got to get benched and then you retire halfway through the year. No, no,
Yeah.
don't do it.
It's, the Saints are built like a team that is complete in almost every area. Um, and when you have a prime or even, back end Drew Brees, that's a phenomenal team like we've seen. The Saints have been the best team in the league over the past couple of years, consistently. And it just goes to show when you don't have a QB, even with a complete team around him, it's not enough. And it's a shame that Drew Brees has kind of regressed to this part, but time is inevitable. Time is undefeated. It has to happen at some point. It's not just him. It happens to every single player. It's just again, it's sad because it's Drew Brees.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Luckily, he can still hang his hat on the fact that he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Oh, without question.
Yeah. All right. So that is the 4 games that have happened. I know we didn't talk about it much because we kind of got sidetracked on the Drew Brees thing, but phenomenal performance from the Tampa Bay defense, which I'm sure will factor into our discussion on the 2 games we have remaining before Super Bowl weekend. Starting Sunday at 3:00 Eastern time, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being hosted by the Green Bay Packers. Brady, Rodgers, first time meeting in the playoffs. Corwin, what do you think about this game?
Oh man, it's gonna be fun. It's another tough offense defense matchup for the Packers offense, Bucks defense. Um, Tom Brady versus Aaron Rodgers. I wish this happened 5 years ago. I wish it happened 10 years ago. But at the same time, it's still a marquee matchup because Tom Brady is uh, f- putting up a fight against time, putting up a serious fight. I'd say he's still winning. It should be exciting. I'm hoping for another. Uh, I don't expect a shootout, but I do expect some really spectacular plays from both of them. I think each of them has at least 1 or 2 spectacular throws deep, or deep for Aaron Rodgers is different for deep from Tom Brady, but deep to their own limitations.
Yeah, I am so interested and excited in seeing what this game entails. As we just said, there wasn't too much deep ball threat in the Saints game to try the Bucks secondary so much. They are good. I'm not trying to say that they're some unknown quantity. They are good. They just didn't get pressed that much in as much in the Saints game. So getting them up against Rodgers and um, also fucking Devontae Adams will be a fascinating game. Um, God, I'm so intrigued in that aspect of it, and just seeing how Tom holds up against what looked like a pretty competitive Green Bay front line. Um,
Yeah.
really giving Goff the fucking business. Something that we didn't see much of in the Saints game. The Saints not really getting too much a hand on Brady, and that is when all quarterbacks play their best, but Brady especially plays his best when he is unfucked with. um, so it'll be interesting to, I guess, just to see how each receiving core, I think, really handles what they're going to be up against. The quarterback play, I think, will of course be outrageous and fun, but I think this game will be. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to say this game is going to be won or lost based on the wide receivers, which I don't think is usually the case,
Hmm.
but I think it will be for this game. Um, but yeah, we'll see.
We will
Uh,
see.
who do you think wins?
Green Bay,
How much?
7.
All right, all right. I'll also take Green Bay. I'll take the under. I'll say 3. I'll say this is a really weird, tight game the whole way. Maybe it'll be a famous Rodgers comeback, or will it be a famous Brady comeback? Who knows who's storming down the field at the end? Um,
All I know is that I do not wanna be in the lead going into the final 2 minutes of this game.
unless you're leading by like
A
15.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah. Oh man, I don't I God, I'd hate to be a coach in that moment. But that's probably why we're not coaches. Um,
You just see, the defensive coordinator having a fucking panic attack on the
I mean,
sideline,
think about it.
hyperventilating.
Your options are either, if you were to like pick a head coaching job or a defensive coordinator job, whatever, is to either deal with Aaron Rodgers at the end of the game, which is always a nightmare, or Tom Brady at the end of the game, who is always a nightmare. Like these are the 2 guys who are like most famous for doing this. Oh God, I'd hate it. I'd hate it. I'd hate it. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the second game, the night game, the AFC Championship game, the Buffalo Bills as hosted by the Kansas City Chiefs. Where do you stand on this one?
I mean, it comes down to who's behind center in Kansas City's locker room. Um, it's if it's Chad Henne, I don't think they have much of a chance. I mean, he had some good throws last week. He had a terrible throw last week. I just don't think it's necessarily enough to stop Josh Allen. And man, it just made me think of how dominant the Bills defense was last week against Lamar Jackson. Granted, very different play style, but Bills defense against Chad Henne is a very different matchup.
Yeah, I think we'd like to say that Andy Reid could scheme his way out of a Chad Henne situation, and make that game competitive. But with how great the Bills defense was against the Ravens, and generally speaking, how well Josh Allen's been playing this season, less so last week, but more so in general over the course of the year, it'd be tough to call it anything. I'm not to say. I don't want to be like, oh, the Buffalo Bills would walk away with that, because Reed really is. I mean, that fucking good of a head coach. But
And their defense is good. Kansas City
yeah,
has a great defense.
yeah, they do. Um, if Mahomes is playing, which is what it sounds like is going to happen based on the reports I have been seeing, I think this is. I hate to say it because I don't want to jinx it because I'm not rooting for Buffalo, but I think this is all but a Kansas City lock to return to the superb owl. But I, I, I don't know which version of the Bills is showing up because if it's the Bills that just played the Ravens, that team was good, not great. If it's the Bills who played like the rest of the season, it's going to be a wild game. I'm just not sure which Bills are showing up.
And it's tough because the Bills have been playing so much better. At the same time, the Chiefs have always been playing at a higher level than that. And, I don't want to say it's a lock because there's so much that can go wrong. There's so much parity. Any team can win any given Sunday. That is so unbelievably true. But man, I would put the Chiefs as heavy, heavy favorites just because of how unbelievably good he is.
I know he is just a generational talent.
And I really wanna emphasize that this is not a hyperbole. This is not, one of the 2 generational talents that come out of every draft. Like, no, this is truly a generational all-time talent, and we do not need to remind anyone of that. But having him versus, uh, Chad Henne at quarterback is a wildly significant difference.
I yeah, yeah. It's literally immeasurable how big of a difference it is. Um, but all right. Final answer. We both picking the Chiefs on this one as well.
Yeah.
All right. So that's our picks for going into next week. Both team Packers, both team Chiefs. Um, let's see how it shakes out. Do you want to stay with football topics and keep it moving from there?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Where do you want to go from here, my friend?
Let's talk confirmed hires.
Ah, all right. Bring it on.
Mac I've misspelled his name in the chat and immediately corrected myself, and I still fucked it up. Dan Campbell, former interim coach for the Dolphins, was the New Orleans Saints assistant head coach and tight ends coach, has been hired by the Lions as their newest head coach. I was wildly thrown off when I first saw this, thinking it was the former offensive line coach of the Dolphins who got fired for doing all that coke and banging a prostitute. But it's a different guy. He's the guy that took over after Joe Philbin was fired. I got very nervous when I first saw Dan Campbell's name pop up with the Lions because I immediately thought it was the former offensive line coach um, who was fired for doing cocaine and banging that prostitute. but it wasn't. It was former tight ends coach for the Dolphins, former interim coach after Joe Philbin was fired. Joe Philbin went 1-3, axed. Uh, Dan Campbell takes over, goes 5-7, which is a losing record. I'm aware of the math, but still a major improvement for a very bad Dolphins team. He leaves that year, becomes the assistant head coach and tight ends coach for the Saints, and just got snatched up by a team with a young tight end that could be very special. I definitely did not see Dan Campbell being, one of the top candidates this year in this cycle. I will say I am pleasantly surprised, very much shocked, but very pleasantly surprised as I looked over it. Um, it happens every year where a coach gets hired just kind of out of the blue. And sometimes it works out really great, sometimes it ends horribly. I think I would put money on Dan Campbell being a fairly good head coach for the Lions for the next several years. Um, you know, being under the Sean Payton coaching tree, especially coming in as a assistant head coach, that's a pretty big piece to look at. He did succeed with the Dolphins team that started 1-3. Definitely not a good team that season. So I like this hire. You have any thoughts?
Not really. I think that the Lions almost couldn't have done anything wrong here. Um, there's so many good candidates flooding the pool of potential hires this year. Um, and the guy that they'd be moving on from had basically no success at all, nothing to write home about. That I think almost any of the guys whose names had been floating around out there probably would have been good, outside of that weird Marvin Lewis rumor for the Jets. I don't know why his name was out there, but outside of Marvin Lewis, basically any of the candidates I think would have been interesting, different, literally not Matt Patricia. And I think while that sounds petty, it matters like a lot.
Oh yeah,
Also, fuck
absolutely.
Matt Patricia, but so yeah, I'm with it.
Perfect. I think this is a pretty great step for the Lions. I always hope that they can really come back and do something with that franchise because oh my god, it's infuriating. But I'm all about it. So good on them.
Yeah. Who else we got?
Um, let's see. I guess we could talk Philip Rivers retiring. Probably should have led with Philip Rivers. This is kind of a big one. Officially announced his retirement, which it is a sad, sad day on that front. He will be missed.
Yeah, just to give a rundown of Philip Rivers' career, he spent um, of his 17-year-long career, he spent fucking goddamn it,
Yeah,
fucking 13. Jesus Christ, 13 years of it in San Diego, 3 years of it in Los Angeles with both with the same team, just given the move. And his final season in Indianapolis with the Colts. He finishes his career with 244 games played, 240 starts. He went 134 wins to 106 losses. He finishes with 5,277 completions, a completion percent lifetime of 64.9, 63,440 yards, 421 touchdowns, 209 interceptions, an average yards per game of 260, and a lifetime quarterback rating of 95.2. Um, Philip Rivers led the league in various things over the course of his career, including at one point in time completions, attempts, completion percent, yards, touchdowns percent, interceptions twice, yards per attempt three times, air net yards per attempt twice, yards per completion once, yards per game once, quarterback rating once, yards once, net yards per attempt twice, air net yards per attempt once, sack percent once, and fourth quarter comebacks once. So he a guy who was consistently up near the top of a lot of league rankings, in addition to being one of football's more specific personalities, with his
Yeah,
bizarro throwing motion and his many children.
and beautiful trash talk.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah, it's gonna
Yeah.
be, super weird to not have his Christian ass on out on the field doing weird shit.
He, he a, Hall of Famer for you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know it's weird because he doesn't have really even any significant playoff, um, experience, much less a, Super Bowl appearance, but at the same time, that's football is a team sport, man, and, that's a lot of that's just out of his fucking hands. He did
Mhm.
his position very, very fucking well. That's all he's supposed to do. So, yeah, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer for me. You?
I think he definitely should be. I'm sure people will really go out of their way to talk down on his career because he didn't win a Super Bowl. He wasn't very successful in the playoffs. At the same time, that is not on him. And I don't think he'll be a first ballot, but I think he'll be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is an age old question. We've seen it with a bunch of players before, but at the end of the day, any championship success is reflective upon the teams that they're. Ted Williams never won a fucking World Series, man. I'm not trying to say Philip Rivers is Ted
Yeah.
Williams because Ted Williams is much better at baseball than Philip Rivers was at football. But the idea that Ted Williams never won, having won a World Series, didn't affect his ability to get into the playoffs or into the Hall of Fame because he's still one of the greatest baseball players of all time. While Philip Rivers probably isn't one of the best quarterbacks of all time, he was top five for like his entire career of guys who were actively playing. And that's just so hard to do, especially since it's at the most important position on the fucking gridiron. So
Mhm.
I just don't know what more you could want. But you're right;
Oh,
it'll be a whole thing, and he
yeah,
won't get
I
first
don't even
ballot.
know. Yep.
How would you describe
Uh,
the Philip Rivers throwing motion?
ooh, that is it is man, it's not a sidearm, it's just this really, yes, he swings his arm out every time he throws. I get you swing your arm out every time you throw, but it's just like this goofy, elongated motion that's just kinda cockeyed. Um, it's weird, and it was his biggest question mark coming out of college, NC State. Um, and I it's one of those things where at no point did anyone say, "Wow, we should start evaluating quarterbacks differently because of how Philip Rivers has been able to do it." It's just been, "Man, somehow he has made a way to get that to work consistently." So, sure, it works. We're never gonna teach it, but it works.
Yeah, it's it's a really big motion that ends in like a weird, almost like kind of push,
Mhm.
and it comes from like a 3/4 slot angle. If you're familiar with like baseball arm slots, like
Good terminology.
it's it's something that looks like it really shouldn't work. And then he played 17 years in the NFL.
Right.
um, eh, it it's so uniquely Rivers. Like it looks like he's doing a Zach Greinke style shout every time he throws the ball because that's the only way to get it to go far.
Oh, I
Like,
love that.
yeah, like it's a weird little motion he's got there, but yeah, it's gonna his personality will definitely be missed heading into next year, but
Mhm.
I also think he picked a good time to kind of get out of the game.
Yeah. We're gonna have a very different league next year than we have this year. That is
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, right now, Philip Rivers and Eli Manning are now both gone. That just leaves Big Ben from that draft class.
Mhm,
Brady, while I know we keep saying he's on the way out, he has to be on the way out within the next 2 years, I'd imagine. We probably just saw the end of Philip Rivers or of Drew Brees,
mhm.
and so we're looking at that and that 2000 to 2004 draft class. These are the last holdouts, and then that's it.
It's a
And
changing of the guard. It's a
depending on
serious,
what the
serious
Steelers want
changing
to
of
do,
the guard.
we might see the end of Big Ben this offseason too. Who knows?
Shut up.
Nope. What else we got?
Let's see, what do we have here? Trent Baalke is the rumored favorite for the Jaguars' new GM. They are working towards a deal there, supposedly. Um, I I don't love that.
Tell me
Um,
why. I do not know who this is.
Trent Baalke was the former, I think he was the GM of the San Francisco 49ers. That was his official title and not anything like, player personnel. Um, and God, I wish I remembered the whole Harbaugh scandal and just that entire ownership group. Just it was a whole goddamn big storyline of just everything falling apart, and Balky was definitely a centerpiece for that. And I really just don't think he would be a good fit for this new look Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they are coming in doing a lot of really great things as um oh my god, I completely lost me. He did a lot of fucking good things. Holy shit. The Cons did a lot of good things this year. They hired a fantastic head coach in Urban Meyer. They got the number 1 overall pick to get a franchise changing player in Trevor Lawrence. You need to bring in a GM with the positive track record, fresh face, fresh look, smart ideas to build this team. I know that's a whole lot of empty talk of, yeah, obviously you wanna bring in a guy who's gonna be good at the position, that's the whole point of what they're doing. That being said, his track record is just not what I would look for in this kinda hire. Um, so looking over his history, he just got hired this past season as the director of player personnel for the Jaguars. He was not in the NFL since 2016 before this past year. I am pessimistic about this hire.
I wonder why he's being considered though. Then, do you think it's just a boys' club thing,
I'd
or do you
have
think
to
that
think
they
so.
buy in the? Do you think they really like buying into the vision here?
I really think so. Um, I can't imagine a guy who hasn't been in the league for 4 years, a guy who was just run out and universally hated in San Francisco. Um, a guy that you bring in for 1 year as the director of player personnel, where I have to admit, wasn't a standout year for player personnel in the Jaguars, facility this year. Um, they had a good draft by all means. I don't think you could solely put that on the number 2 guy in the front office after starting a few months, month or 2. You got hired in early February, draft is into April, so 3 months, before the draft. I'm not gonna put much credit, if any, on him for that, and nothing else has stood out, and there's nothing here to change my mind and change my opinion of him. That's basically all this rambling has come down to.
Fair enough, man.
Oh, they
I
did have a
too
really good
have
draft this year,
decided to. I too have now decided to hate Trent Baalke. So you
as you
convinced
should.
one guy.
CJ Henderson, Caleb on Chason, Laviska Shenault, Ben Barch in the 4th round, and a guy like James Robinson undrafted to be your starting running back moving forward. Got a lot of pieces here in this draft. That's a really great draft for Jacksonville after 1 year. But Trent Baalke didn't do fucking anything.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead.
Raheem Morris.
I will skip this one for now just because I do not think it's substantial enough, for discussion right now.
Fair enough.
This is still being chewed up in the rumor mill.
Fair enough. So then we'll hang on to that one. There's anything not written down here that is confirmed news that's worth discussing or in the
Not
NFL?
in football.
Yeah. So Corwin and I had a chat before the show. There's a lot of rumor discussion anyway, flying around about what a Deshaun Watson trade to the Jets might look like, since it's been heavily discussed and Richard Sherman is like openly advocating for it, which is super weird. The idea of free agents being pushed to the Jets. I say this as a lifelong Jets fan. It is very odd. But that's a big discussion. That's a big discussion. We'll save that for later. Oh, that's a big discussion. Anyway, so we'll save that for another time. Probably Sunday. Just talk about trade value and draft pick value, stuff we've talked about before, but it'll be especially important with this very real life example. So hang on to your shirts. We'll get to it. I guess that being said, shall we take a quick pivot over to the wild world of baseball?
Absolutely.
All right. So George Springer signed a brand spanking new contract for 6 years, $150 bajillion. So
Is that the
George,
actual unit?
no, it's 150. So George Springer officially is longtime center fielder for the Houston Astros, officially out of the organization, and heading to Toronto. Which in of itself is yeah, I had heard it rumored. I had heard more so the prospect of George Springer going to the Red Sox. I'd heard him, what it would be like if George Springer went to the Yankees. What if George Springer I like him in Toronto because I think the Blue Jays are a very fun team, and while I do not enjoy George Springer because I think he's a dick, I am excited at the prospect of what that lineup will look like, even though my team has to face them, and that sounds not fun. But I guess let's talk George Springer value here first, since well, that's what we're looking at with this contract. So 6 years, $150 million. That breaks down to a $25 million AAV. George Springer, over the course of his career, has been worth, I guess we'll start with his rookie year, has been worth 2 WAR, 4.2 WAR, 5.1, 5.0, 2.7, 6.4, and 2.2 WAR in each of his respective seasons. He's been playing at a premium position. He's got a career slash line of 270, 361, 495, good for an 852 OPS and a 131 OPS plus. He also ranked in 2020, which was a shortened season, but he's still ranked in the 92nd percentile in the expected batting average, the 96th percentile in xWOBA, 81st percentile in barrel percent, 95th percentile in expected slugging, 68th in hard hit, 82nd in sprint, 78th percentile in strikeout percent. He's a really, really good fucking hitter. And he plays at a premium position. So Corbin, what do you think about? And he plays it well. He's been worth over his career 1.3 DWAR, which again, the fact that the number is not negative is really what matters from that. So Corbin, what do you think about this signing in terms of just value?
For the first time, possibly ever, when discussing non-football contracts, I look at the $25 million price tag and think, That seems right. That seems right. You know, 5 years ago, I think he would have been pushing 35 if it was, this year, but he's what, like 31, 32,
Yeah, he'll be heading
30?
into his age 31 season.
Okay, that's fair. 6 years, 37-year-old center fielder is not gonna be worth $25,000,000. 31-year-old George Springer probably isn't worth $25,000,000. He's probably worth more than that this year. That being said, it's the whole life of the contract, not this one day or 1 year. I think this is a fair contract. I like this.
Yeah, obviously the term is significantly different, but if you compare this AAV to like what Bryce Harper got, where Bryce Harper gets I think 1.4, 1.5, something like that, $1 million more per year than George Springer is getting. But at a younger age and a less advantageous position or less significant position, however you want to
Mhm.
phrase it, that's not rude. Right field is still hard. um, but that I mean that makes sense. George Springer is a little bit older than Bryce Harper was when he hit free agency, and so that's going to ding him decently significantly. At the same time, George Springer is also still very good and plays a more valuable position. So that seems to all make total sense. Um, we did talk about the Blue Jays roster makeup earlier in the offseason as some of these free agency signings started to come off the board. Um, talk about how their outfield played very well last year in terms of batting. So it looks like George Springer will likely probably replace Randall Grichuk in the lineup. Um,
Quite the increase in talent there.
yeah, so Randall Grichuk, who has 7 seasons under his belt, the same amount as George Springer.
Drafted
Randall Grichuk
before Mike
only
Trout.
spending the, huh?
Sorry, I just had to get that in there. Drafted before Mike Trout.
Oh, that's a shame. I didn't know that. Oh, that hurts.
One pick before, also to the Angels, so it kinda doesn't count, but at the same time, it does completely.
Yeesh. It definitely still does.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, Randall Grichuk spending the last 3 years in Toronto. Over the course of his 7 years in the MLB, he has been a negative 0.2 DWAR center fielder and provided 8.9 total OWAR. That is in contrast to George Springer's 24.8 OWAR. Um, Randall Grichuk's lifetime slash line. Again, he had a good season last year, a 114 OPS plus, but he outperformed his career average OPS plus at 106, whereas George Springer also outperformed his career OPS plus by hitting 140, his career average being 131. So even if both these guys regressed back to where they'd be, George Springer is still 24 percentage points, 25 percentage points better better than average of a hitter that Randall Grichuk is, and a better center fielder than Randall Grichuk is. And that now from there, if you want to gamble on the success or failure of Randall Grichuk, you can either start slotting him in at DH and get a little bit more flexibility in regards to how you want to play your bench roles, or you can fucking trade him and get some like pitching depth because wow, do they need that?
Yeah.
In addition to maybe some third base help. So uh, it's just I like this. I like seeing Toronto um, getting back into it. Um, they are not a small market team, and they should not act like it. They are in the fourth largest population area in baseball, and I think the third or fifth, third to fifth, I forget where they rank, largest media market in baseball. So they are not a small market team. They could spend just as much as the Dodgers and Yankees and Red Sox do, and they should. And I'm glad to see them taking steps towards possibly doing that.
I like it. Blue Jays
Do you,
always seem like kind of a black hole to have free agents go to. Maybe it's just because it's Canada, but, uh, in a vacuum, I like it.
does this change your perception of George Springer now that he's moving
No.
away from the Astros organization?
I'm happy he's moving away, but it's not about to change my opinion on him.
Agreed. What do you think about? Oh, the other team I meant to mention in terms of teams that might have gotten George Springer was the Mets. Obviously, the Mets' new ownership has been spending a lot of money and talking about all the money that they would like to spend in other places. There was a lot of talk of George Springer to the Mets conversations. What do you think this? Do you think this means anything for the Mets?
No. There's some other Mets news that we did not write down as a topic of discussion that
Yeah, I know.
probably should be a topic of discussion at some point.
Yeah, I figured we'd save it for the end, but yeah,
Yeah.
um, we'll get there. Uh, yeah, I'm not sure. I I don't think I think a lot of Mets fans and mediaites who discuss baseball want to see a 1-year turnaround for the Mets where they go from being um, the middling, not so great team that they've been since their World Series run. Um, but I also, and I think that that's partially on the back of everyone likes an underdog story, and the Mets are always the underdog story. Um, Everyone likes to see good ownership. Everyone loves to see good ownership that spends money and is engaged with the fans and all that shit. And so far, Steve Cohen's been that. Um, and they have the benefit of being not the Yankees while also being in New York. That helps. Um, I would also like to point out, though, that it's never that easy with baseball. And while the NL East is definitely in a grabbable position right now, the Nationals are on the way down still, even coming off of a bad year last year. The Phillies never put it together. The Marlins are on the way up, but they're probably still not going to be well positioned to take the divisions, while the Braves are still very good. So if the Mets could make a big turnaround, then they certainly would be well positioned to perhaps make some type of run at the divisional lead or division title. I would be very reluctant to say that's going to happen next year, though, just because how many times have we said this about the Mets? How many times? And it's not, again, it's not even just on the back of the Mets. It's like the nature of baseball. What happens if these guys just don't click together? What happens if it's another Robinson Cano situation where he was the best hitter on his old team and then came to the Mets and then for no reason just started sucking dick? Like there's so much that could happen. If I'm the Mets, if I'm a Mets fan, I should say, I'm very happy with all the money being spent because we are definitely building towards a future for maybe 2 years from now. I'm going to next season with literally zero expectations of doing well.
I don't know
Zero.
how you can be a Mets fan and go into any season with expectations of doing well.
They keep doing it, man. I'm telling you, Mets fans need to act more like Jets fans, which is wild because most Mets fans are Jets fans. Well, a lot of Mets fans are Jets fans. And yet, Mets fans act way more optimistic than Jets fans do when it comes to their team. And maybe it's because the Mets have had better pieces than the Jets over the past 5 years, but both teams have been fucking dick. Like, but for whatever reason, Mets Twitter is way more energized about the Mets than Jets Twitter ever gets about the Jets. And you gotta get it through your thick fucking skulls that both these teams fucking suck, and they need to prove to you otherwise before you start jumping up and down screaming about how good they are. It's the exact same way I treated the Browns. The Browns were bad until they weren't bad, and they had to prove to you that they weren't bad. Because we got 3 off seasons of this might be the Browns' year, and which they followed by sucking dick until they actually got good. You got to give these teams time. Bad teams
Absolutely.
take time.
Absolutely.
The Steelers could turn things around in 1 year, which I know is a weird thing to say coming off of 11, 12 and 4 year. But we all know how it ended out. They are that's a good team still that's just having a rough time. The fucking Chargers, not the Chargers, the Rams could turn things around in 1 year. Um, the Browns couldn't. The Mets aren't. Give bad teams time. You
There
got to
are
figure their
rare
shit out.
circumstances where you can turn a team around completely in a single season. They are not common.
No, and a big part of that is depth. We see it every year across sports. The biggest thing that makes great teams great is that their depth players are better than other teams' depth players. Because, your favorite starting pitcher, he's going to get hurt. Your favorite third baseman, that motherfucker's getting hurt too. Your favorite left fielder, that guy's going to miss like 20 games. That's just fucking ball, man. That goes with every sport. And whether a team stays good or crumbles is going to depend a lot upon whether you're playing a guy who's good to pick up the slack in the rotation, a guy that's going to hit, a decent batting line for you over the course of 20 games versus a guy who's going to absolutely get shellacked on the mound once every 5 days, and a guy like Tyler Wade who's going to strike out every time he looks at the plate because he just can't figure out how to swing a major league pitching. That's the difference. That's what it's going to come down to, because great teams are great on the margins. Very rarely are great teams great as an entire centerpiece. Sports are one on the margins.
Yeah. Oh boy.
That's my rant.
I don't think I'm ready for baseball to start up again.
It's weird to process. It honestly is.
I need more time. Football's still going on. Hockey just started. I can't jump into baseball right now.
Pitchers and catchers report in like a month.
Which it surprises us every year, and then the lead up is always feels 3 times as long because of it. At some point I'll get used to it, but not yet.
Give yourself some time, man. Shall we close out on the sad Mets news?
Yes.
Anything else to chit chat about before we move on to this?
No.
All right. So it came out in the wee hours of the morning, I guess Wednesday. I think it was yesterday. The Mets GM, Jared Porter, had a story break about him in which it was revealed that he had harassed a female reporter, sent her somewhere in the neighborhood of 62 unanswered, desperate, needy text messages, including unsolicited dick pics. And he has since been fired by the Mets. And this has once again raised the conversation of women in sports, which for some reason that I continue to be fucking baffled by is even a goddamn conversation. But it is because we see this a lot. And it's especially, I think, uncomfortable to see, given the conversation so much like this, just without the dick pic, that we had with that assistant GM in Houston like 2 years ago. Remember that guy? That also got fired for harassing female reporters?
I do not remember his name.
I don't remember his name. Well, his name ain't fucking worth remembering, but I don't remember his name either. And we had a whole conversation back then about this. And it's the same conversation with different source material with this. I think this has larger, or at least more recognizable, societal implications, because the concept of sexting, I think, is for both wanted and unwanted, is very familiar to everyone. Whereas maybe some of the interoffice power dynamics might be a little bit harder to grapple with. But they're both coming from the same place, which is, here's a guy that got to a very high position in an MLB front office very fast, who's a fucking scumbag. And it feels like someone should have recognized that. And nobody did. And now the Mets are in a terrible spot. And this is, I'm sure, awful for every female fan of the sport and woman who heard about this story in general. And I promise I'm going to let you say something in a second, but I just can't imagine. I can't imagine the position that a woman in sports has to be in, where not only are you expected to do your job, but are we also going to expect women to have to police these people and to like let us know who's bad? Because here we got two dudes who both got up to high-end positions in front offices who are awful to women, and it went
Mhm.
totally unknown because we, like, didn't ask women about it? It's a crazy, crazy world.
Yeah, all that I am really going to say on it is, it shouldn't have it shouldn't holy shit. Words are just running away from my brain right now. It's amazing how many sentences I've started and just have completely lost all recollection of what I was trying to say, not even 10% in. There shouldn't be any tolerance for something like this. The fact that the NFL is a boys' club and always has kinda built this culture of tolerance to this sort of behavior towards women. I refuse to accept anyone that argues otherwise, and it's up to the fans to push for it, and it's up to the people in the NFL, specifically the men in the NFL, at all levels to take that personal step and disavow this kind of behavior, in any form and in any capacity. This should be a zero tolerance action, um, and the fact that it's coming from someone so high up in the organization is appalling, considering how much was talked about his character and, um, his personality, how good of a guy he was. Just it's unacceptable and does not deserve another position in baseball, does not deserve another position in sports, and does not deserve any more time on this podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna avoid him because he doesn't really matter at this point. I know. Just a couple more thoughts. Sandy Alderson was asked. I forget if it was. I forget by whom he was asked. I want to say it was Mina Kimes, but I don't want to just throw her name out there for the sake of it. If he had interviewed or asked any women, any female coworkers about their perception of Jared Porter before hiring him, and Sandy Alderson responded no. And again, this can't be this can't be on the abused people's backs to have to answer for or to inform us. And that's to say that they shouldn't be forced to come forward and say, "Hey, don't hire
Yeah.
this fucking lunatic."
I
Because
know this.
life's not like we can't look at someone's resume and say, "Ah, yes, they are great at what they do," and just go about our day like looking at a baseball player's slash line and saying, "Oh, that's a great slash line. He must be a great," and then be shocked when the personality sucks and he's a bad guy. And performance doesn't equate to being a good guy. Well, there's got to
Mhm.
be more accountability up front.
I really just I it just fucking happened again, where I just had this whole thing lined up and I was practicing the words and blah, 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 here we are. Um, Fuck me up. This is unbelievable. This is gonna fucking drive me insane. Alright, I can't.
That's okay, buddy. Um, this is exceedingly disappointing. Um, I don't even want to.
Oh,
It.
fuck. I don't want I just brought it back from the realm of nothingness and that we call my brain. I'm just gonna go.
Go.
I don't want this to be a crossover episode between this and Juicing the Big Screen, but I watched Bombshell recently, which discusses a similar situation, to a much more serious extent. Basically, the ground level being people in power doing bad things to women who don't deserve it in the name of furthering their careers. And it's a very poignant movie when it comes to discussing this topic. I just this isn't something that is unique to sports. This is something that is occurring in every possible field that you can think of. Um, it's just a real damn shame that it seems like so many people are pushing to avoid reform and just prevent progress from being made, and you really hate to see it when it's just so universally agreed upon that it's disgusting, disgusting behavior.
Yeah, I would love to see the MLB be firm here and slap a lifetime ban on this guy, just to send a message. I know he already got fired and he's already probably persona non grata here, but really just like be out in front of it, make a story about it, um, and let people have a voice here. Let whatever women want to speak up have the platform to do so by keeping this conversation alive and by you doing the right things here. Just because it's very, very likely that no one's going to hire this guy again doesn't mean someone won't. You should put your foot down on it. And if I'm the Mets, what I'm going to start doing is have a very, very transparent hiring process for my next GM, which they said will probably take place next season, next offseason, not this offseason, since we're so close to the start of the regular season, which I don't fully understand that because someone's got to be making trades, but whatever. And no one's asking for you to hire a woman just for the sake of compensating for this mistake. But I would have an excruciatingly open and transparent process for who you're hiring, thorough background checks, and maybe open up the pool a little bit. I'd love to see a black GM. I can't think of the last time we had a black GM in baseball. That seems fucking weird. That there's not more black GMs in baseball. Anyway, side point. There is room to make this a opportunity for inclusion, but they have to take it, and I hope that they do, because our game is the game of baseball, the game of football, all the sports we love and discuss in this podcast don't matter nearly as much without our female fans and our female employees of those teams and all the women who work in sports that make it run. Sports as we know it is not the same without literally half the fucking population of the goddamn USA. Like, I mean, it just, and again, that's why it's incredible that this is a conversation. Absolutely, but I'm tapped out.
I'm as well. We've given it enough talking as it deserves, which is very little. Well, the topic deserves a lot. He deserves very little.
Yeah, hopefully that's the last time we're saying that dude's name for the rest of our lives. But
I already forgot it.
I had to Google it before we started talking about it, make sure I got it right, because I didn't even want to think about this dude. So, yeah, I'm with you. All right. Well, if you want to follow the show, you can do so on Twitter at JuicingPod. If you want to hit us up via email, you can do so at juicingthenumbers@gmail.com. And until Monday, y'all have a good one.
Bye.